is opening the Global Climate Summit with a pledge to cut at least in half the climate-wrecking coal and petroleum fumes that the US pumps out. Let's just cut across to this virtual summit.
That together, with compassion and commitment, we can all emerge from the present storm transformed.
We know we must, and we know the time to act is now. We must go faster and further than ever before.
To bring countries of the world together to raise ambition and meet this moment. That's the only way for the world to succeed together.
This is how we solve the climate crisis. Together.
Please welcome the President and the Vice President of the United States.
Your Excellencies, distinguished leaders, and esteemed colleagues from around the world, welcome to this historic Leaders Summit on Climate. I want to thank you for being here and for your leadership. I have spoken with a number of you about the climate crisis. We have talked about the scarcity of water. We have talked about the need to build resilience. And we have talked about the importance of investing in clean technologies. Together, of course, we come from very different places, but we share this common concern and this common threat. Here in the United States, the storms hitting our Gulf Coast are worst every year. The wildfires in my home state of California have grown in intensity. And of course, no nation or region is immune. Whether it is Western Europe, where heat waves have made it very difficult to stay indoors while risking a health risk, or the Pacific Islands, where rising sea levels threaten to encroach on the land and homes of lifelong residents. Or in Central America, where last year two major hurricanes devastated entire communities. As a global community, it is imperative that we act quickly and together to confront this crisis. And this will require innovation and collaboration around the world. It will require the use of renewable energy and new technologies. And it will give each of our nations the opportunity to build healthier communities and stronger economies. Here we believe tackling climate change, improving communities and creating jobs can occur simultaneously. And we must recognize the importance, of course, of justice in the work that we do. The communities hardest hit by climate change are the same communities harmed by wealth and gender inequality, toxic air pollution, and so much more. This truth holds around the world. So I urge all of us to focus on these communities, including indigenous communities, and consider their insight and experience in our efforts moving forward. They are critical leaders in this fight. Friends, the health of our communities, the well-being of our workers, and the strength of our economies depend on what we do now. And I can think of no one more committed to achieving our collective goals than President Joe Biden. The president was one of the first climate change, and on our first day in office, he led the fact that we would rejoin the Paris Agreement. And the president is just getting started as we work to tackle this crisis while creating clean energy jobs across our nation. It is now my great honor to introduce the President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Good morning to all our colleagues around the world leaders for taking part in this summit. I thank you. Your leadership on this issue is a statement to the people of your nation and the people of every nation, especially our young people that we're ready to meet this moment. And meeting this moment is about more than preserving our planet. It's also about providing a better future for all of us. That's why when people talk about climate, I think jobs. Within our climate response lies an extraordinary engine of job creation and economic opportunity.
40 world leaders are invited to join the climate summit, which is being held right now. The Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, is also part of the Leaders Summit panel. He will speak during the first session of the collective sprint to 2030. Russian President Vladimir Putin will also is set to deliver a speech during the summit. Putin has announced his vision for Russia. The Russian president wants his country's total net greenhouse emissions to be less than that of the European Union over the next 30 years. Though he did describe this goal as tough, but he also said that this was in fact achievable. All eyes will also be on Chinese President Xi Jinping.
The science is undeniable, but the cost of inaction keeps mounting. The United States isn't waiting. We are resolving to take action. Not only our federal government, but our cities and our states all across our country. Small businesses, large corporations, American workers in every field. I see an opportunity to create millions of good-paying, middle-class union jobs. I see line workers laying thousands of miles of transmission lines for a clean, modern, resilient grid. I see workers capping hundreds of thousands of abandoned oil and gas wells that need to be cleaned up and abandoned coal mines that need to be reclaimed, putting a stop to the methane leaks and protecting the health of our communities. I see auto workers building the next generation of electric vehicles and electricians installing nationwide for 500,000 charging stations along our highways. I see the engineers and the construction workers building new carbon capture and green hydrogen plants to forge cleaner steel and cement and produce clean power. I see farmers deploying cutting-edge tools to make soil of our heartland the next frontier in carbon innovation. By maintaining those investments and putting these people to work, the United States sets out on the road to cut greenhouse gases in half by the end of this decade. That's where we're headed as a nation. And that's what we can do if we take action to build an economy that's not only more prosperous, but healthier, fairer, and cleaner for the entire planet. You know, these steps will set America on a path of net zero emissions economy by no later than 2050. But the truth is, America represents less than 15% of the world's emissions. No nation can solve this crisis on our own, as I know you all fully understand. All of us, and particularly those of us who represent the world's largest economies, we have to step up. You know, those that do take action and make bold investments in their people and clean energy future will win the good jobs of tomorrow and make their economies more resilient and more competitive. So let's run that race. Win more sustainable future than we have now. Overcome the existential crisis of our times. We know just how critically important that is, because scientists tell us that this is the decisive decade. This is the decade we must make decisions that will avoid the worst consequences of the climate crisis. We must try to keep the Earth's temperature to an increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. You know, the world beyond 1.5 degrees means more frequent and intense fires, floods, droughts, heat waves, and hurricanes, tearing through communities, ripping away lives and livelihoods. Increasingly, dire impacts to our public health. It's undeniable, you know, the idea of accelerating and punishing the reality that will come if we don't move. We can't resign ourselves to that future. We have to take action, all of us. And this summit is our first step on the road we'll travel together, God willing, all of us, to and through Glasgow this November and the UN Climate Change Conference. You know, to set our world on a path to secure, prosperous, and sustainable future. The health of communities throughout the world depends on it. The well-being of our workers depends on it. The strength of our economies depends on it. The countries that take decisive action now to create the industries of the future will be the ones that reap the economic benefits of the clean energy boom that's coming. You know, we're here at this summit to discuss how each of us, each country, can set higher climate ambitions that will in turn create good-paying jobs, advance innovative technologies, and help vulnerable countries adapt to climate impacts. We have to move. We have to move quickly to meet these challenges. The steps our countries take between now and Glasgow will set the world up for success. To protect livelihoods around the world and keep global warming at a maximum of 1.5 degrees Celsius, we must get on the path now in order to do that. If we do, we'll breathe easier, literally and figuratively. We'll create good jobs here at home for millions of Americans and lay a strong foundation for growth for the future. And that can be your goal as well. This is a moral imperative, an economic imperative, a moment of peril, but also a moment of extraordinary possibilities. Time is short, but I believe we can do this. And I believe that we will do this. Thank you for being part of this summit. Thank you for the communities that you and the commitments you have made and the communities you're from. God bless you all. And I look forward to progress that we can make together today and beyond. We really have no choice. We have to get this done.
All of you with us today. As President Biden and Vice President Harris have made clear, this administration intends to do more than any in U.S. history to meet the climate crisis. What the United States can do at home can make a significant contribution toward keeping the Earth's warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's why we're raising our ambitions, as the President described, and we will meet the new targets we set. But of course, no country can overcome this existential threat alone. We're in this together. And what each of our nations does, or does not do, will not only impact people of our own country, but people everywhere. Many of us, perhaps all of us, feel a strong sense of urgency. That's why we're here. We hope that will translate into making the progress necessary during this critical year and over this decisive decade. The consequences of falling short are clear. Every one of our countries is already experiencing the impact of climate change, and they'll only get worse. More frequent and more intense storms, longer dry spells, bigger floods, more people displaced, more pollution, higher health costs. And climate change can drive the spread of disease, food insecurity, mass migration, and conflict. All of these consequences are hitting underserved and marginalized communities in our countries the hardest. And some countries are experiencing much more severe impacts than others, something we must acknowledge and address. But, as the President said, it would be a mistake to think about climate only through the prism of threats. As we take concrete actions to reduce emissions and prepare for the unavoidable impacts of climate change, we have an opportunity to create sustainable, good-paying jobs, to promote not only greater growth, but greater equity, and to provide sustainable, reliable, affordable access to energy to more people, which is crucial to every aspect of human development. So we're rooting for every country, every business, every community around the world to succeed in this effort. In that spirit, as other countries strive to meet and raise their climate targets, the United States will mobilize resources, institutional knowledge, and technical expertise from across our government, the private sector, civil society, and research universities to help. We want every country here to know we want to work with you to save our planet, and we're all committed to finding every possible avenue of cooperation on climate. If we work together, we can do more than just address this crisis. We can turn it into an opportunity to improve our societies and deliver for people worldwide. And we can lay the foundation for cooperation on other shared challenges. There are many issues on which we don't all see eye to eye. This isn't one of them. No matter what country we're from, we know the world that we want to pass on to our children and our grandchildren. I can think of no better or more urgent cause to bring us together. It's now my honor to call on His Excellency, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres.
Earth. Thank you, President Biden, for bringing us together to focus on the existential threat of climate change. You have started this summit by walking the talk, and I applaud the commitment of the United States to cut greenhouse gas emissions 50 to 52% below 25 levels by 2030. Mother Nature is not waiting. The past decade was the hottest on record. Dangerous greenhouse gases are at levels not seen in 3 million years. Global temperature has already risen 1.2 degrees Celsius, racing towards the threshold of catastrophe. Meanwhile, we see ever-rising sea levels, scorching temperatures, devastating tropical cyclones, and epic wildfires. We need a green planet, but the world is on red alert. We are at the verge of the abyss. We must make sure the next step is in the right direction. Leaders everywhere must take action. First, by building a global coalition for net zero emissions by mid-century, every country, every region, every city, every company, and every industry. Second, by making this a decade of transformation. All countries, starting with major emitters, should submit new and more ambitious nationally determined contributions for mitigation, adaptation, and finance, laying out actions and policies for the next 10 years aligned with the 2050 net zero pathway. Third, we need to translate those commitments into concrete immediate action. So far, only 18 to 24% of pandemic recovery spending is expected to contribute to mitigating emissions, reducing air pollution, or strengthening natural capital. The trillions of dollars needed for COVID-19 recovery is money we are borrowing from future generations. We cannot use these resources to lock in policies that burden them with a mountain of debt on a broken planet. We must put a price on carbon, shifting taxation from income to carbon, and subsidies for fossil fuels. Ramp up investments in renewable energy and green infrastructure. Stop the financing of coal and the building of new coal power plants, and phase out coal by 2030 in the wealthiest countries and by 2040 everywhere else. Ensure a just transition for affected people and communities. Fourth, to build a truly global net zero coalition, we need a breakthrough on finance and adaptation. And this is critical for trust and collective action. Donors and multilateral national development banks must move from 20 to 50% in all climate flows to resilience and adaptation. Before the United Nations Climate Conference in November in Glasgow, we need concrete proposals that need access to greater finance and technological support for the most vulnerable countries. Developed states must deliver on public climate finance, including the long-promised $100 billion for climate action in developing countries at the G7 summit in June. Excellencies, young people are pushing their elders to do what is right. Women are on the front lines. More than 700 cities have committed to net zero by 2050, and I'm encouraged by the mobilization of the financial sector around the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, representing $70 trillion of assets. And I call on all members to align as soon as possible behind the gold standard on credibility and ambition established by the Asset Owners Alliance that I convened. Let us now mobilize political leadership to move ahead together to overcome climate change, end our war on nature, and build lives of dignity and prosperity for all. And I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. It's now my honor to call on the President of the People's Republic of China, His Excellency Xi Jinping.
尊敬的拜登总统，尊敬的各位同事，很高兴应邀出席领导人气候峰会。气候变化给人类生存和发展人与自然
needs to come together to foster a community of life for man and nature. First, we must be committed to harmony between man and nature. All things that grow live in harmony and benefit from the nourishment of nature. Mother Nature has nourished us, and we must treat nature as our root. Respect it, protect it, and follow its laws. We should protect nature and preserve the environment like we protect our eyes. Second, we must be committed to green development. Green mountains are gold mountains. To protect the environment is to protect productivity, and to improve the environment is to boost productivity. The truth is as simple as that. We need to make sure that a sound environment is there to buttress sustainable economic and social development worldwide. Third, we must be committed to systemic governance. Mountains, rivers, forests, as well as farmlands, lakes, grasslands, and deserts all make indivisible parts of the ecosystem. We need to properly balance all elements and aspects of nature and maintain overall balance in the ecosystem. Fourth, we must be committed to a people-centered approach. The environment concerns the well-being of people in all countries. We need to take into full account people's longing for a better life and good environment, as well as our responsibility for future generations. We need to deliver social equity and justice in the cause of green transition and increase people's sense of benefit, happiness, and security. Fifth, we must be committed to multilateralism. We need to work on the basis of international law, follow the principle of equity and justice, and focus on effective actions. We need to uphold the UN-centered international system, comply with the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and its Paris Agreement, and strive to deliver the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Sixth, we must be committed to the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. The principle of common but differentiated responsibilities is the cornerstone of global climate governance. We need to give full recognition to developing countries' contribution to climate action and accommodate their particular difficulties and concerns. Developed countries need to increase climate ambition and action and make concrete efforts to help developing countries accelerate the transition to green and low-carbon development. Not long ago, the Chinese and US sides released a joint statement addressing the climate crisis. China looks forward to working with the international community, including the United States, to jointly advance global environmental governance. Colleagues, the Chinese civilization has always valued harmony between man and nature. It has been our constant pursuit that man and nature could live in harmony with each other. China will follow the thought on ecological civilization and implement the new development philosophy. We will continue to prioritize ecological conservation and pursue a green and low-carbon path to development. China will strive to peak carbon dioxide emissions before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. China has committed to move from carbon peak to carbon neutrality in a much shorter time span than what might take many developed countries, and that requires extraordinarily hard efforts from China. Support is being given to encourage peaking pioneers from localities, sectors, and companies. We will strictly control coal-fired power generation projects. We will strictly limit the increase in coal consumption over the 14th five-year plan period and phase it down in the 15th five-year plan period. China will host COP15 of the Convention on Biological Diversity and support COP26 of the UNFCCC in achieving positive outcomes. China will promote joint efforts to build a green Belt and Road to benefit the people of all countries. I am confident that as long as we unite in our purposes and efforts, we will rise above the global climate and environment challenges and leave a clean and beautiful world to future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I now call upon the Prime Minister of the Republic of India, His Excellency Narendra Modi.
Your Excellency, President Biden, colleagues, my fellow citizens of this planet, Namaskar. I would like to thank President Biden for taking this initiative. Humanity is battling a global pandemic right now. And this event is a timely reminder that the grave threat of climate change had not disappeared. In fact, climate change is a lived reality for millions around the world. Their lives and livelihoods are already facing its adverse consequences. Friends, for humanity to combat climate change, concrete action is needed. We need such action at a high speed, on a large scale, and with a global scope. We in India are doing our part. Our ambitious renewable energy target of 450 gigawatts by 2030 shows our commitment. Despite our development challenges, we have taken many bold steps on clean energy, energy efficiency, afforestation, and biodiversity. That is why we are among the few countries whose NDCs are 2 degrees Celsius compatible. We have also encouraged global initiatives like International Solar Alliance, LEAD IT, and the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. Friends, as a climate responsible developing country, India welcomes partners to create templates of sustainable development in India. This can also help other developing countries who need affordable access to green finance and clean technologies. That is why President Biden and I are launching the India-US Climate and Clean Energy Agenda 2030 Partnership. Together, we will help mobilize investments, demonstrate clean technologies, and enable green collaborations. Friends, today, as we discuss global climate action, I want to leave one thought with you. India's per capita carbon footprint is 60% lower than the global average. It is because of our lifestyle is still rooted in sustainable traditional practices. So today, I want to emphasize the importance of lifestyle change in climate action. Sustainable lifestyles and guiding philosophy of back to basic must be an important pillar of our economic strategy for the post-COVID era. Friends, I recall the words of the great Indian monk, Swami Vivekananda. He called on us to arise, awake, and stop not until the goal is reached. Let us make this decade of action against climate change. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. And now, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, the Right Honourable Boris Johnson. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Tony, and Your Excellencies, colleagues, friends. I'd like to begin by thanking President Biden very much for bringing us all together in the way that he has, and for setting out the problem in the eloquent way that he did at the beginning, and of course for returning the United States to the front rank of the fight against climate change. And I'm really thrilled by the game-changing announcement that Joe Biden has just made. And I'm very proud that the UK is doing the same. We were the first country to pass legislation for net zero. We have the biggest offshore wind capacity still, I think, of any country in the world, the Saudi Arabia of wind, as I never tire of saying. We're halfway to net zero. We have carbon emissions lower than at any point since the 19th century. We're ending support for fossil fuels overseas and doubling our international climate finance. And we're actually speeding up because we see the obligation, as colleagues have just pointed out, for developed countries to do more. We're legislating to deliver 78% of the reductions needed to reach that goal by 2035. And as host of COP26, we want to see similar ambitions around the world. And we're working with everybody, from the smallest nations to the biggest emitters, to secure commitments that will keep change to within 1.5 degrees. And I think we can do it. And to do it, we need the scientists and all of our countries to work together to produce the technological solutions that humanity is going to need, whether it's carbon capture and storage, or solving the problems of cheap hydrogen delivery, or getting to jet zero flying, getting to net zero flying, making sure that we can really roll out EVs properly, making sure that our homes stop emitting such prodigious quantities of CO2, moving to sustainable domestic living. We can do this together across the world. And it's going to mean the richest nations coming together and exceeding the $100 billion commitment that they already made in 2009. I stress how important that is. Plus, and I think what President Xi had to say about the harmony with nature was absolutely vital. If we're going to tackle climate change sustainably, we have to deal with the disaster of habitat loss and species loss across our planet. And we want to see more examples of governments and private industry working hand in hand, as with the newly launched LEAF coalition to reduce deforestation and the multi-trillion-dollar Glasgow Financial Alliance for net zero. And to do these things, we've got to be constantly original and optimistic about new technology and new solutions, whether that's super resistant crops that are super resistant to drought, or more accurate weather forecasts like those we hope to see from the UK's new Met Office £1.2 billion supercomputer that we're investing in. I'm not saying any of this is going to be easy, and there is obviously going to be a political challenge. And I think it's very important to go back to the original words of President Biden, because it's vital for all of us to show that this is not all about some expensive, politically correct green act of bunny hugging, or however you want to put it. I'm not wrong with bunny hugging, but you know what I'm driving at, friends and colleagues. This is about growth and jobs, and I think the president was absolutely right to stress that. And I want to leave you with the thought that we can build back better from this pandemic by building back greener. And don't forget that the UK has been able to cut our own CO2 emissions by about 42% on 1990 levels, and we've seen our economy grow by 73%. You can do both at once. Cake, have, eat is my message to you. So let's work together on this. Let's go to Kunming in October and then Glasgow in November. armed with ambitious targets and the plans required to meet them. And let's use this extraordinary moment and the incredible technology that we're working on to make this decade the moment of decisive change in the fight against climate change, and let's do it together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. And now the Prime Minister of Japan, His Excellency Yoshihide Suga. Mr. Prime Minister.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Joe, I am pleased to meet with you again. I would like to reiterate my deepest gratitude for your hospitality at the White House just a week ago. I would also like to take this opportunity to commend your leadership for holding this important summit. Extreme weather events such as torrential rains, forest fires, and heavy snowfalls are witnessed worldwide in recent years, and climate change is said to be a major cause of such events. Responding to climate change and progressing decarbonization is hence an imminent challenge which the whole of humankind should aim to solve. At the same time, our response to climate change is no longer a constraint on our economy. Rather, it will be the driving force of the long-term dynamic growth of not only Japan, but also the whole world. With this vision in mind, in the fall of last year, immediately after assuming my office as Prime Minister, I declared that Japan will aim for net zero by 2050. We will take a big step toward the resolution of this global issue. Japan aims to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 46% in the fiscal year 2030 compared to the fiscal year 2013 as an ambitious target which is aligned with the long-term goal of net zero by 2050. Furthermore, Japan will continue strenuous efforts in its challenge to meet the lofty goal of cutting its emission by 50%. Such a goal of 46% in reductions would mean that Japan will raise our current target by more than 70%, and it will certainly not be an easy task. However, by defining a top-level ambitious target appropriate for the next growth strategy of the nation which underpins global manufacturing, Japan is ready to demonstrate its leadership for worldwide decarbonization. From now on, we will accelerate our deliberations for establishing concrete measures toward achieving the target. Japan, in order to create a virtuous cycle of the economy and the environment and to grow strongly towards our ambitious goal for 2030, will work to maximize the utilization of decarbonized power sources such as renewable energy and take incentive measures sufficient for inducing investment by companies. The national and subnational governments of Japan will work together to aim for achieving decarbonization in more than 100 subnational regions across the country by 2030. Japan will also work for the realization of innovation that will enhance production and secure sustainability in food, agriculture, and forestry sectors. Furthermore, Japan will advance the transition to a circular economy, thereby creating new industries and employment. Japan will continue its unceasing efforts toward 2030 and 2050.
Global decarbonization is what cannot be achieved by the efforts of one country alone. It is a challenge that requires the whole international community to be united as one. We can create global waves for climate change measures with ambitious targets presented and implemented by countries attending the summit today who are responsible for around 80% of global emissions, thereby overwhelming the whole world with our waves. Joe, on the occasion of my recent visit to the United States last week, I had the pleasure to confirm with you our commitment to lead the world global decarbonization efforts. In more concrete terms, Joe and I launched Japan-U.S. Climate Partnership on Ambition, Decarbonization, and Clean Energy. Based on this partnership, Japan and the United States will work to promote worldwide decarbonization and continue cooperation in each area of the implementation of the Paris Agreement, clean energy technologies and innovation, and accelerating transition of developing countries, including Indo-Pacific countries, to a decarbonized society. In parallel to such bilateral efforts, Japan has provided public and private climate finance amounting to approximately 1.3 trillion Japanese yen, which is equivalent to approximately $11.8 billion. We announced that we will make contributions of up to $3 billion to the Green Climate Fund. We will support the global transition to decarbonization by maximizing the use of Japan's leading technologies in areas such as energy efficiency, hydrogen, and CCS, carbon capture and storage. In the area of adaptation, Japan will promote international cooperation to address the impacts hitting vulnerable states in the world. No other time than now does international society require further solidarity for the realization of a decarbonized society. Japan, as a nation that puts utmost importance on multilateral approaches, is determined to take the lead in solving the challenge of climate change for the whole of humankind by cooperating with each country and international organizations for the coming months leading up to COP26 and beyond. Thank you for your attention.
Pleasure to call upon the Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tous. I want to begin by thanking President Biden for hosting this summit. Mr. President, thank you for your leadership on addressing the climate crisis and on other shared priorities, from the fight against COVID-19 to building a strong middle class. I'm encouraged to see so many countries coming together today to fight climate change. It's the only way to overcome the challenges people face in every part of our world. That's why it's also vital that we all work together to strengthen respect for international law, reaffirm our collective commitment to human rights, and stand up for people who face persecution abroad. Our collective success depends on finding a better path, not only to a more sustainable future, but to shared peace and prosperity for everyone. Notre priorité continue d'être notre lutte.
Our priority continues to be combating COVID-19. We rely on science to save lives and develop vaccines, but we must also listen to climate science, which tells us that we are facing an existential threat.
Against a polluted planet. When Canadians elected us 5 years ago, our emissions were projected to keep rising through 2030. But with hard work and a solid plan, Canada is now on track to blow past our old target of 30% reduction below 2005 levels. Last December, we strengthened our climate plan to reduce more emissions, including with a world-leading price on pollution. This week, we made additional investments in the budget, and today, Canada is in a position to raise our climate ambition once again. Our new climate target for 2030 is to reduce our 2005 emission levels by 40 to 45%. And we will continually strengthen our plan and take even more actions on our journey to net zero by 2050. Seules les politiques climatiques sérieuses donnent des résultats.
Only bold climate policies lead to bold results. For example, you can no longer pollute in Canada for free. In 2030, our carbon price will reach $170 per ton.
Climate ambition and economic ambition go together. That's why we're investing in public transit, clean energy, retrofitting homes, and decarbonizing industry like steel, cement, and aluminum to secure our clean industrial advantage. We're also banning harmful single-use plastics, protecting 30% of our oceans and land, and planting 2 billion trees. And we will make it law to respect our new 2030 target and achieve net zero emissions by 2050. That's our local story. And it could be part of a global success story too. In Canada, we've worked hard to get to over 80% emissions-free electricity, We're not going to stop until we get to 100%. If major economies in the room were to follow Canada's lead and adopt a rising price on pollution and commit to phase out coal plants, we would accelerate our global path for a safe, prosperous net zero future. Le Canada est un pays qui produit et exporte de l'énergie.
Canada is a country that produces and exports energy. And so I understand that this will not be easy. We are all facing different realities, but if all governments and Indigenous peoples and different sectors can all come together and work together, then we should be able to find solutions and create real change. And that is why we're here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. I now call upon the Prime Minister of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina. Madam Prime Minister.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable President Joe Biden, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Excellencies, Assalamu alaikum and good morning. I thank President Biden for convening the summit and inviting me to speak to this August gathering. Bangladesh deeply appreciates the United States' return to the Paris Climate Agreement and is keen to engage with the international community. Excellencies, despite being a climate vulnerable country with resource constraints, Bangladesh has emerged as a global leader on adaptation and mitigation. Every year, we are spending on an average $5 billion US, about 2.5% of our GDP, on climate adaptation and resilience building measures. The 1.1 million forcefully displaced Rohingyas from Myanmar, whom we have sheltered, worsened our vulnerability. Bangladesh is pursuing a low-carbon development path to raise our national determined contribution, NDC, and adaptation ambition. We have included new sectors in addition to the existing energy, industry, and transport sectors in the mitigation process. We are planning to submit a quantified, ambitious NDC by June 2021. Excellencies, Bangladesh is observing Mujib Year, marking the birth centenary of the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. We are planting 30 million saplings nationwide and adopted Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan to achieve low-carbon economic growth. As the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum and B20, Bangladesh's key focus is to uphold the interest of the climate vulnerable countries. We are hosting the South Asian Regional Office of the Global Center on Adaptation, which is promoting locally led adaptation solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic has reminded us that global crises can only be addressed through a strong collective response. As such, as a responsible member state of the COP and as the chair of CBA, I would like to make few suggestions. Number one, immediate and ambitious action plan by developed countries to reduce their carbon emissions to keep the global temperature rise at 1.5 degrees Celsius. The developing nations should also focus on mitigation measures. Number two, ensuring the annual target of $100 billion US, which should be balanced 50-50 between adaptation and mitigation with special attention to the vulnerable countries while pursuing loss and damage. Number three, major economies, international financial institutions, and private sectors should come forward for concessional climate financing as well as innovation, and number 4, focus is needed on green economy and carbon neutral technologies with provision to technology transfer among nations. I thank you all.